And as a matter of fact, if this recession continues unabated, then of course we may be into a period of deflation where the price increases moderate to the point we actually have falling prices. I mean, that could happen. I mean, listen, if demand falls enough, we could have falling prices. And we'll wait and see.
I noticed like a lot of storefronts have sale.
Oh yeah, and if you look at the consumer price index and so on. Now here's the problem. Here's the problem. You have to understand this, that the consumer price index, which is the best measure of prices because the Bureau of Labor Statistics looks at the price of everything from rent to medical care to everything, not just, what you see in the storefront. But you have to understand there are some very important things that don't go into the consumer price index. The consumer price index is the price of things that are currently produced. No asset prices are in there. So home prices are not in there. Stock market prices are not in the consumer price index.
What about like food and energy?
Food and energy are in the consumer price index. Now you can look at those parts of the consumer price index that exclude food and energy, but real estate is not in there. There's an imputed rental value of the home that's in there, as well as actual rents. But home values themselves, the house values, are not in there. And neither is the stock market values and so on. So you have to understand, when you get an asset bubble like you had for stocks in the late 90s, or like you had for stocks and real estate recently, it's not in the consumer price index. And so it distorts it. Now you might say it ought to be, and I might agree with you, but it's not. So things get distorted. And going a little further afield, the term irrational exuberance. Now, the stock market was going up very rapidly, as you know, in the late 90s. The NASDAQ, which is now about 15, 16, 1700, it's between 16 and 1700 now. By 1999, 2000, NASDAQ was up to 5,000. Now it's 1/3 of where it was almost 10 years ago. So that gives you an idea of what was going on.
Did they adjust that for inflation?
No. No, it's not adjusted. So, therefore, there was an asset bubble. But when folks went to Alan Greenspan, who's head of the who was at that time head of the Federal Reserve, as you know, chairman of the Board of Governors. And they said, Alan, you've got to put a pin in the bubble and stop it because it's going to pop and it's going to hurt a lot of people. He said, not our job. It's not our job to control asset prices. It's our job to be vigilant when it comes to the consumer price index, but not asset prices. Okay? Does everybody see the problem there? Now recently, by recently I mean 2004, 2005, 2006, people went to Mr. Greenspan and said, Alan, we not only have an asset inflation when it comes to real estate, but once again, stock market. He said, not our job. And you know and I know the Federal Reserve contributed very importantly to that asset bubble. Well, that asset bubble was a real bubble, wasn't it? And it did pop. And the air is still, the air is still leaving it. And so my guess is if this ever happens again, we might end up with a different answer about asset bubbles and asset inflation. because clearly we didn't take it into account, and we have a big problem now. Because as you recall, fitting all these things together, that asset bubble was an important part of this, wasn't it? Why people said, oh, it doesn't matter that we're taking on huge amounts of debt, as long as that A grows, it doesn't matter how much the L grows. Well, the problem was, of course, the left side of that balance sheet popped and the air is rushing out. The right side doesn't pop. It takes much, much longer to reduce debt. You've got to pay it off, unless, of course, you go through a bankruptcy procedure in which it's excused. So we are now suffering from all that, and my guess is we're going to go forward in a different way from now on than we did before. You see? So getting a little further afield in your question, but I'm trying to show you how all these things fit in. I hope I'm not making it too complex. I don't mean to, I don't mean to obfuscate by giving a full answer, but there we are. Remember, we divided this into old economy, new economy. Remember, the new economy guys said, well, that's old economy. Okay, now let's delve into that a little more, because I think it gives us a better insight on what's going on. But before we do that, Rebecca has a question.
My question was that, was why Alan Greenspan felt like there was the irrational exuberance, that there was a justification for moving in that direction.
Did everybody hear the question was about irrational exuberance? And the way that worked is the economist Robert Shiller went to visit Alan Greenspan in 1996, talked to him about irrational exuberance, and then Alan Greenspan, who was at the time chairman of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, he made the term popular. And he referred to the rise in the stock market as irrational exuberance. And as we know, it was. But Alan Greenspan did not, as we said earlier, he did not try to pop the bubble by forcing interest rates up until the speculation in stocks stopped. He wouldn't do that because he felt those markets should work themselves out themselves. The only time the Federal Reserve would step in would be in case inflation surged. And the idea is higher interest rates, less borrowing, less spending, less demand, less rapid increase in prices. Baby steps, right? So Alan Greenspan said, if we don't have a rapidly rising CPI, the Fed is not going to force interest rates up. $64 question. Were stock market prices in the CPI? Consumer Price Index? No, therefore, we're not going to step in and do it. Does everybody get it? Were real estate prices in the CPI? No, therefore, we're not going to do it. Plus, there was a faith that all these things would work themselves out through market mechanisms. That is, as far as the irrational exuberance goes, whether it came to stock market prices or real estate. For instance, going ahead to real estate, the belief was that there would not be a real estate bubble, that real estate prices would never collapse because people have to live in their homes. They don't live in their stocks, they live in their homes. Well, there's a first time for everything, isn't there? And now, of course, I'm sure Mr. Greenspan wished he had done some things differently, but I mean, that's the way history is, isn't it?